Imagine a world drowning in moral ambiguity, where the powerful trample the weak, and truth is a commodity traded for personal gain. Sound familiar? This isn't just a description of our present reality. It mirrors the world of Elijah, a prophet in ancient Israel whose story bursts forth from the pages of history with timeless relevance. We're not just going to retell an old story. We're going on a journey, your journey, my journey, and Elijah's, to discover how one man's unwavering faith ignited a firestorm of change and what that means for us today. Forget dusty relics and ancient rituals. We're talking about the raw, untamed power of conviction, the courage to stand alone, and the audacity to believe that even in the darkest of times, a single spark of truth can set the world ablaze. Are you ready to discover the fire within? Part 1. A World in Crisis. Echoes of the Past. To understand Elijah, we must first understand his world. The kingdom of Israel, once a beacon of hope, was fractured and morally bankrupt. King Ahab, a puppet ruler manipulated by his ruthless wife Jezebel, had plunged the nation into idolatry, replacing the worship of Yahweh with the Canaanite god Baal. This wasn't merely a change of religious preference. It was a societal earthquake. Why should we care about this ancient drama? Because the core issues at play in Elijah's time are eerily similar to the challenges we face today. Ahab's reign was characterized by corruption and abuse of power. Ahab and Jezebel used their power to enrich themselves and silence their opposition. Sound familiar with some of the actions of our leaders today? The story of Naboth's vineyard, which we will explore later, is a chilling example of how they manipulated the law for personal gain. Today, we see similar abuses of power across the globe, from corrupt officials to corporate greed. Erosion of moral values. The worship of Baal, with its emphasis on fertility cults and ritual prostitution, led to a decline in moral standards. Similarly, today we grapple with issues like the breakdown of the family unit, the objectification of individuals, and a general sense of moral relativism. It seems like the more we advance technologically, the more we retrogress morally. Social injustice. The poor and vulnerable were marginalized and exploited under Ahab's rule. Today, we see vast disparities in wealth and opportunity, with the marginalized often facing systemic discrimination and a lack of access to basic necessities. Many NGOs and even religious organizations are working and speaking out against the injustices in our society, just as Elijah did in his day. Elijah's world was one where truth was suppressed. Jezebel actively persecuted the prophets of Yahweh, seeking to eliminate any dissenting voices. Today, we see attempts to silence whistleblowers, journalists, and activists who dare to expose wrongdoing. There are independent media houses that are speaking out against the ills in society, irrespective of whose ox is gored. Faith was compromised. The people of Israel were caught between two belief systems, their faith in Yahweh weakened by the allure of Baal's promises of prosperity and pleasure. Today, many find themselves similarly torn between competing ideologies, struggling to maintain their faith in the face of doubt and uncertainty. Into this chaotic and morally compromised world stepped Elijah, a man from the wilderness with a message that would shake the nation to its core. He was a disruptor, a challenger of the status quo, a voice crying out in the wilderness, much like many activists that we have today in our society who are speaking out against the ills in our various societies. His story is not just a historical account. It's a mirror reflecting our own struggles and a blueprint for how to navigate them with courage and faith. He was a man who was ready to sacrifice anything to do the right thing and stand for the truth. Part 2. The Prophet's Challenge, Finding Your Mount Carmel. Elijah's first dramatic act was to declare a drought, a direct challenge to Baal's supposed power over rain and fertility. This wasn't just a meteorological event. It was a spiritual declaration of war. It was Elijah saying, "Your gods are powerless. The God of Israel is the true God and is in control." It was a bold move that put not only his reputation, but also his life on the line. This made him a wanted man by the authorities. What does this mean for us? It means that faith often requires us to take a stand, even when it's unpopular or dangerous. Each of us in our own lives faces our own Mount Carmel moments. Situations where we must choose between what is right and what is easy, between our convictions and the pressure to conform. Think about these modern-day Mount Carmel scenarios. The whistleblower. An employee discovers unethical practices within their company. Do they risk their career and reputation by speaking out, or do they remain silent to protect their livelihood? This is similar to what Elijah did, where he risked his life to confront the evil perpetrated by King Ahab and Queen Jezebel. The advocate. A student witnesses bullying or discrimination in their school. Do they stand up for the victim, even if it means facing social ostracism? Elijah was an advocate for the oppressed and the weak. In the same way, we need to stand up for those who cannot stand up for themselves for one reason or the other. The ethical dilemma: a professional is offered a lucrative opportunity that compromises their ethical principles. Do they choose personal gain over integrity? This is similar to what happened to Naboth. He had the opportunity of gaining more from the king, but decided to stick to his principles. Elijah's challenge on Mount Carmel wasn't just about proving which God was more powerful. It was about forcing the people to choose, to stop wavering between two opinions. Indecision, Elijah understood, is a form of spiritual paralysis. It is just like refusing to take sides. In our own lives, we must be willing to make difficult choices, to stand for what we believe in, even when it's uncomfortable. I remember a story of a young lady who found herself in a situation that tested her faith. She was in a relationship with a man she loved, but he didn't share her religious beliefs. While at first she thought it was a trivial issue, as time went on, it became a major source of friction between them. He wanted her to compromise her values, to engage in activities that went against her conscience. She was faced with a Mount Carmel moment. After much soul-searching and prayer, she chose to end the relationship, prioritizing her faith over her desire for companionship. It was a painful decision, but it was a decision that ultimately strengthened her relationship with God and set her on a path toward greater spiritual fulfillment. Elijah's story teaches us that true faith is not passive. It requires action, courage, and a willingness to stand alone. One man with the truth will always defeat many with lies, no matter how long it takes. Compromise can be a slippery slope. Small compromises can lead to larger ones, eventually eroding our values and weakening our resolve. We need to always stand for what is right, irrespective of who is involved. God honors those who honor him. Elijah's obedience, though costly, ultimately led to a powerful demonstration of God's power and a turning point for the nation of Israel. When we honor God, we open the door for him to work in our lives and in the world around us. Part 3. Beyond the fire, the still small voice. Within Elijah's victory on Mount Carmel was spectacular, but it wasn't the end of his story. In fact, it was followed by a period of deep despair and doubt. Threatened by Jezebel, Elijah fled into the wilderness, where he collapsed under a broom tree, exhausted and ready to die. This is a crucial point that is often overlooked in the story of Elijah. Even the most courageous and faithful individuals experience moments of weakness and vulnerability. It is easy to get discouraged when we face challenges. It is in those moments that we need to remember that God is still with us. Elijah's story is a reminder that it's okay to be human, to feel fear, doubt, and even despair. It is normal for us to sometimes feel like giving up, especially when we are faced with challenges that seem insurmountable. What can we learn from Elijah's lowest moment? Honesty with God. Elijah poured out his heart to God, expressing his fear, frustration, and sense of isolation. He didn't try to hide his emotions or pretend to be strong. We too need to be honest with God about our struggles, our doubts, and our fears. There is no need to pretend before God. We need to come before him just the way we are. The power of rest. God didn't rebuke Elijah for his despair. Instead, he provided him with food and rest. Sometimes the most spiritual thing we can do is to take care of our physical and emotional needs, to allow ourselves time to heal and recharge. We need to prioritize rest so that we can remain strong physically, emotionally, and spiritually. God's presence in the stillness. God didn't appear to Elijah in the wind, the earthquake, or the fire, but in a still small voice. This teaches us that God often speaks to us in the quiet moments, in the stillness of our hearts when we are most receptive to His guidance. We therefore need to take time to listen to God and not allow the cares of this life to drown out His voice. I once read about a missionary who, after years of dedicated service in a remote and challenging environment, began to experience burnout and spiritual dryness. He felt isolated, ineffective, and questioned his calling. Like Elijah, he wanted to give up. But instead of succumbing to despair, he decided to take a retreat, spending several days in solitude, prayer, and reflection. It was during this time of quiet introspection that he heard God's gentle whisper, reminding him of his initial calling and reassuring him of His continued presence and support. This experience renewed his spirit and enabled him to continue his ministry with fresh vigor and passion. Elijah's encounter with God in the wilderness was a turning point. It was a reminder that true strength comes not from outward displays of power, but from an inner connection with the divine. It is in the quiet moments, in the stillness of our hearts, that we truly hear God's voice and find the strength to carry on. Part 4. Lessons for a Modern Life, the Legacy of a Prophet. Elijah's legacy extends far beyond the dramatic events of his life. His story offers timeless lessons that can guide us in our own journeys of faith and purpose. Courage in the face of adversity. When we are faced with what seems like a hopeless situation, we need to find courage in God and continue to move forward. Elijah's life was a testament to the power of courage in the face of overwhelming odds. He challenged the powerful, stood up for the oppressed, and never wavered in his commitment to God, even when his life was at stake. We can draw inspiration from his example, finding the courage to face our own challenges, to speak truth to power, and to stand up for what we believe in. The importance of integrity. All through the life of Elijah, he never compromised on his integrity. He was always true to God and to his calling. In a world that often tempts us to compromise our values for personal gain, Elijah's unwavering integrity serves as a powerful example. We must strive to live with integrity in all areas of our lives, both public and private. The power of obedience. Elijah was not always perfect, but he was always obedient to God's commands. He listened to God even when it did not make sense to him. This is evident in him obeying God and speaking to Ahab about the drought. His obedience, even when it was difficult or dangerous, opened the door for God to work in extraordinary ways. We too must learn to trust and obey God, even when we don't understand His plan. Finding your purpose. Elijah's life was driven by a clear sense of purpose. He knew who he was and what God had called him to do. We all have a unique purpose in life. It is also important to note that finding our purpose is not always a straightforward process. It often involves a journey of self-discovery, prayer, and a willingness to step out in faith, trusting that God will guide us along the way. Leaving a legacy. Elijah's impact extended far beyond his own lifetime. He mentored Elisha, who continued his prophetic ministry, and his story has inspired countless others throughout history. We too should strive to leave a positive legacy, to make a difference in the lives of others, and to contribute to something larger than ourselves. We should live our lives in such a way that generations after us will continue to benefit from its impact. The story of Elijah is not just an ancient tale. It's a call to action. It's a reminder that each of us has a role to play in God's plan, that we are called to be courageous, to live with integrity, and to make a difference in the world. It's a challenge to find our own Mount Carmel moments, to stand up for what is right, even when it's difficult, and to listen for the still small voice of God in the midst of life's storms. Part 5. Elisha and the continuation of the prophetic mantle. The story of Elijah doesn't end with his dramatic departure. His mantle, both literally and figuratively, fell to his chosen successor, Elisha. This transfer of spiritual authority wasn't merely a symbolic gesture. It was a powerful demonstration of God's continuing work through human vessels. The relationship between Elijah and Elisha provides valuable insights into mentorship, succession, and the importance of preparing the next generation of leaders. Elisha's bold request. Elisha's request for a double portion of Elijah's spirit wasn't about seeking personal glory. It was an expression of his deep desire to be adequately equipped to carry the weighty responsibility of the prophetic office. He understood that he needed an extraordinary measure of God's power to continue the work that Elijah had begun. This teaches us that true leadership is not about titles or positions, but about a deep commitment to serving God and his people, even if it means acting in a way that displeases men. Mentorship and succession. Elijah's mentoring of Elisha highlights the crucial role of experienced leaders in guiding and preparing their successors. Mentorship is not just about imparting knowledge and skills, it's about sharing wisdom, providing support, and fostering spiritual growth. We see this principle at play in various fields today, from business to academia to religious organizations. Effective leaders understand the importance of investing in the next generation, ensuring that the work they have begun will continue long after they are gone. The miracles of Elisha. Elisha's ministry was marked by numerous miracles, many of which mirrored those performed by Elijah. This demonstrated that the power of God was not limited to one individual, but could flow through anyone who was willing to be used by him. It serves as an encouragement to us today, reminding us that God can work through each of us, regardless of our background or perceived limitations. Every believer is important in fulfilling God's purpose on earth. Let's explore some specific examples of Elisha's ministry that further illustrate these points. The parting of the Jordan. Just as Elijah had parted the Jordan River, Elisha did the same, demonstrating that he had indeed received the double portion of his master's spirit. This act solidified his authority as the new prophet and showed the people that God was with him, just as he had been with Elijah. The healing of the waters in Jericho. This miracle addressed a practical need of the community, demonstrating that God's power is not only about the spectacular, but also about the everyday concerns of his people. The widow's oil. Similar to the miracle of the widow of Zarephath, this miracle showed God's provision for the poor and vulnerable. The Shunammite woman's son. This story, which involves the resurrection of a dead child, highlights God's power over life and death and his compassion for those who are grieving. The healing of Naaman. This miracle, performed for a foreign military commander, demonstrated that God's grace extends beyond the borders of Israel and is available to all who seek him in faith. Part 6. Modern-day Elijahs. Finding your voice and making a difference. The spirit of Elijah didn't vanish with his ascension to heaven. It lives on in individuals throughout history who have dared to stand up for truth, challenge injustice, and live with unwavering faith. Who are the modern-day Elijahs in our world? Where can we find examples of individuals who embody his courage, integrity, and unwavering commitment to God's purposes? Social justice advocates. Think of individuals like Martin Luther King Jr., who, like Elijah, confronted a powerful and deeply entrenched system of injustice. He was just a man, but he took a stand for what was right. He challenged the status quo and employed nonviolent resistance to fight for civil rights. He wasn't engaging in those activities to be popular, but because it was the right thing to do. His unwavering faith and courageous leadership inspired a movement that transformed a nation. Just like Elijah, he was persecuted, but he kept advocating for justice until he paid the ultimate price. These individuals, often at great personal risk, fight for the rights of the marginalized, the oppressed, and the voiceless. They are the prophets of our time, calling us to a higher standard of justice and compassion. There are many other people like that today who are taking a stand for what is right. Environmental activists. Those who fight to protect our planet from environmental destruction are also channeling the spirit of Elijah. They are confronting powerful corporations and indifferent governments. These activists challenge us to be better stewards of God's creation and to recognize the interconnectedness of all living things. One can easily liken them to Elijah, who challenged King Ahab and the people of Israel for turning their back on God and worshiping idols. Whistleblowers. Individuals who expose corruption and wrongdoing within organizations or governments, often at great personal cost, are modern-day Elijahs. They embody the prophet's commitment to truth and his willingness to challenge those in power. Just like Elijah, they often face threats and intimidation, yet they remain resolute in their commitment to exposing the truth. People of faith in action. Everyday individuals who live out their faith in tangible ways, serving the poor, caring for the sick, and demonstrating compassion to those in need, are also carrying the torch of Elijah. These people may not be famous or powerful, but their lives are a testament to the transformative power of God's love. What can we learn from these modern-day Elijahs? Courage is contagious. When one person has the courage to stand up for what is right, it inspires others to do the same. Faith requires action. True faith is not passive. It compels us to act, to make a difference in the world around us. Every voice matters. Even if we feel small or insignificant, our voices can have a powerful impact when we speak truth to power and advocate for justice. I think of people like Nelson Mandela, who spent 27 years in prison for his opposition to apartheid in South Africa. He never gave up hope, even in the darkest of times, and after his release, he continued to fight for a more just and equitable society. His unwavering commitment to his principles and his refusal to be silenced serve as an inspiration to us all. I am also reminded of Mother Teresa, who dedicated her life to serving the poorest of the poor in India. She showed us that even the smallest acts of kindness, when performed with love and compassion, can have a profound impact on the lives of others. Her life was a testament to the power of selfless service and a reminder that we are all called to be instruments of God's love in the world. Part 7. Your call to be an Elijah. Embracing the fire within the story of Elijah is not just a historical account or a collection of inspiring examples. It is a personal invitation, a call to each of us to embrace the fire of the prophet within ourselves. How can we in our own lives embody the spirit of Elijah and make a difference in the world? Finding your Mount Carmel. What are the issues in your life, your community, or the world that stir your heart and call you to action? Where do you see injustice, corruption, or a need for change? These are your Mount Carmel moments, the opportunities for you to stand up for what you believe in and make a difference. It may be something as seemingly small as intervening when you see someone being bullied, or as significant as starting a movement for social change. You do not have to wait until you are in a position of power to start doing something about the ills in society. You can start now. Cultivating inner strength. Elijah's strength came from his deep connection with God. We too must cultivate our inner spiritual lives through prayer, meditation, and reflection, allowing God's voice to guide us and empower us. It is also important to state that connecting with like-minded individuals will go a long way in helping you to remain strong. Living with integrity. We must strive to live with integrity in all areas of our lives, refusing to compromise our values for personal gain or convenience. This means being honest in our dealings with others, even when it is difficult. It means standing up for what is right, even when it is unpopular. It means being true to ourselves and to God, no matter the cost. Embracing the power of one. We may feel small or insignificant in the face of the world's problems, but we must never underestimate the power of one person to make a difference. Every act of courage, every act of kindness, every act of faith can create a ripple effect that extends far beyond our immediate sphere of influence. Answering the call. God is always looking for people he can use to fulfill his purpose. The question is, will you be available? Being available entails making yourself ready to be used by God. Just like Elijah, God is calling each of us to be his voice, his hands, and his feet in the world today. He is looking for modern-day Elijahs who are willing to stand up for truth, to challenge injustice, and to live with unwavering faith. The question is, will you answer the call? The time to act is now. The world needs your voice. The world needs your courage. The world needs your faith. The world needs you to be a modern-day Elijah. Let your journey begin. Let the fire within you burn brightly, illuminating the darkness and bringing hope to a world in need. A legacy of fire. Elijah's story is a timeless testament to the power of faith, courage, and unwavering commitment to God's purposes. His legacy is not confined to the pages of history. It lives on in the lives of those who dare to embrace his spirit and carry his fire into a world desperately in need of light. Let us be inspired by his example. Let us learn from his struggles, and let us answer the call to be modern-day Elijahs, making a difference one courageous act at a time. The fire of Elijah still burns. Let it ignite within you, and let it set the world ablaze.